I honestly enjoy doing these housing update videos for you guys because let's face it, our key housing market has turned into some sort of thriller show you'd find on Netflix because you're screaming at the TV at these random events seemingly happening, assuming you've already canceled your Disney Plus subscription, of course. In our case, some of the headlines that are coming out of the Canadian housing market definitely has had my head shaking, and I'm sure your head has also been shaking at some of these crazy headlines. Not one day goes by where don't see a headline about the housing market, and I'm like, why? Why are we in this position? Why is Canada's real estate such a, you know, let's talk about that. Our housing market has seen a rebound with interest rates rising. We have labor shortages. We have high levels of immigration coming into the country that has continued to boost economic levels in Canada. So what happened to that recession that everyone and their mother and father were talking about at the end of last year when they said 2023 will be the year of a recession? Well, apparently that recession, Ken, has been kicked down the road to now 2024 is what I'm hearing. Well, take a look at this report by Desjardins. According to them, Canada's economy is doing much better than expected thanks to the recovery of the housing market in Ontario and B.C, as well as the high demand for workers and the rapid population growth across almost all provinces. However, the report also goes on to warn that this level of growth is just not sustainable and that we will inevitably hit a slowdown by 2024, as the impact of these higher interest rates we've been seeing since last year really starts to kick in. So they're telling me that this level of growth of population and the rising housing prices is not sustainable. Now we're just pointing out the obvious, and I'm sure you already knew that, except I don't think the government really is interested. We know that this level of immigration growth, we know that this level of housing growth, it's not sustainable. We are at the break when it comes to the cost of living. The middle class has been squeezed, and it's just, we're not in a good situation. The Bank of Canada has already raised its key interest rate multiple times this year after numerous increases back in 2022. This means that the borrowing costs for household debt, commercial debt, personal debt, they have all increased across the board. It is now harder for businesses and for people in general to make these new debt payments because the cost of servicing this debt has now become very, very expensive, especially if you had become accustomed to rock bottom rates. The report goes on to say that we can expect to see a slowdown in home sales and an eventual drop in prices, especially in Toronto and Vancouver, two areas of the country that have become the most unaffordable when it comes to housing and real estate in general. You know what? Hit that like button and let me know in the comments before if you have heard this line before, that the housing market will eventually drop because it has become unaffordable. I've been hearing this for a very long time now. If you've been hearing the same, I really want you to hit that like button and let me know in the comments. If we have yet to see prices drop in 2023 because of these rising interest rates, which everyone thought would lead to a market crash, but it hasn't, what will make 2024 any different? Should it all just be the same? Doesn't Canadian real estate just go in one direction and that is just up? According to the report, the reason we'll see a slowdown in 2024 is that it takes time for the impact of these higher interest rates to really kick in. And once that impact really kicks in, that should be enough to drive down demand and really slow the housing market down. That's the theory. And if we expand on that, that slowdown wouldn't impact all provinces equally. Ontario and B.C, in theory, will be the hardest hit because they have seen the most exponential gains in their housing markets. And therefore, what goes up must come down is the concept here. So if Ontario and B.C have seen that exponential growth, they will be the most impacted when prices start to fall. Now, Alberta and Saskatchewan, on the other hand, because they haven't seen that crazy growth, although Calgary is getting up there, we'll see more stabilization as they will still benefit from higher oil prices, and that should provide some sort of stability to that housing market. But in these two provinces in particular, you should be able to expect stable growth when the impacts of these higher interest rates is fully realized. And everybody that is following this theory is hanging their hat on the fact that when it comes to monetary policy, there is always a lag from when an interest rate is increased to the time the impact is really felt. We have seen excessive interest rate increases since 2022. And the theory is that we are now at a point where those impacts should not have a real compounding effect, and we should start to see a sharp impact of those higher interest rates. Because as those mortgage rates are coming up for renewal, people who locked in, let's say, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they now have to renew in a much different environment than compared to the environment they locked those rates in 3, 4, 5 years ago. And as more of these people start to lock in those higher rates, they'll see an impact on their cash flows and their monthly budgets because they have to put more money for their mortgage. That's what the theory is, that if all that is happening, that domino effect, we will start to see the impact of these higher rates slow down the housing market. So here's where this theory sort of loses wheels and starts to fall apart. There's one major force that is keeping the housing situation where it is today, and that is population growth. Population growth is a key factor supporting the economic engine of Canada, and that is keeping everything where it is at today, especially if the government intends to fully realize those really high immigration targets. Because it's really that simple. More people means more demand for goods, more demand for services, and more demand for housing. It's a natural law of things. The more people want a scarce resource, there's going to just be more value in that resource. The federal government has set some pretty high targets. Let's recap, and I'm sure you're already aware of what those targets are, but for those of you that don't know those targets, let's recap. Ottawa has set a target of 465,000 new permanent residents in 2023, 485,000 in 2024, and 500,000 in 2025. Now, this is just new permanent residents. So when we talk about the housing market and what needs to happen, a major trigger event, a black swan event, or whatever you want to call it, what really needs to happen to shake the housing market for it to sort of lose its wheels and start stabilizing? We all thought that was going to be higher interest rates, as if interest rates goes up, naturally people can't afford such large mortgage payments, they can't afford to get large mortgages, so that should really dampen housing prices. But now the focus on the trigger event will be what's keeping the housing market afloat, and that is, again, population. So the thought is that if immigration numbers start to fall from their targets, that will be the trigger event that causes the economy to sort of lose its steam and causes the housing market to lose its steam, because we're forecasting such high targets, and if those targets aren't being realized, then all of a sudden we're not seeing that expected demand anymore because we're not trying to cram in that many people into the country. In other words, when newcomers realize how crazy expensive Canada really is and how the cost of living situation and the quality of life situation isn't all that great, they may not want to come here anymore, and that will really cause things to shake up. What I think these reports and economic outlooks and forecasts, what they really confirm is what many of us already know. The housing market is not healthy, it is not balanced, it is not sustainable. It's been driven by speculation. We can see the impact of low supply and cheap credit. That is what's beneath this housing market. I do honestly think that a correction at some point is inevitable, but I just don't think it's going to be severe and going to hit hard. It may be more of a gradual meltdown type of situation versus a giant shock and crash type of situation. If we think about Canada, it's a massive country by land. But when it comes to livable or habitable areas, there's really only 2, maybe 4 if you want to stretch it, cities that where everybody wants to come to. Toronto, Vancouver, and then that other second tier with Montreal and Calgary. So that's the crux of it. Different regions have different opportunities, different challenges, and we need to be aware of them. Yes, Canada's a massive country, but when you look at its zones, it has regional housing markets. It's hard to classify Canada as one large housing market. Each province will vary. But what do you think? Do you think the housing market will crash hard in 2024? Or will it be more of a slower meltdown approach in 2024? I want to hear your thoughts on the housing market. Do you agree with these economists? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But if we put all these forecasts, these theories, these economic outlooks to a side, The one truth and the fact of the matter is that Canada today is facing an unprecedented housing crisis. And much of this has been our own doing. We've sort of been shooting ourselves in the foot with these really stretched immigration targets. We just don't have the infrastructure or support system in place to manage the influx of people we're seeing. One example of this is called affordable housing, or also known as subsidized housing. I'm going to show you the shocking reality of what it actually takes to go on a waitlist for the so-called affordable housing program, and what you need to do if you're trying to buy a home and it won't cost you an arm and a leg. If you're living in Canada right now, you already know that finding affordable housing is a nightmare situation. Prices are soaring, there really isn't that much supply, and demand is crazy high right now. But do you know how long people have to wait just to get onto that waiting list for those government subsidized housing programs? You want to brace yourself, because I had to just take back in awe when I saw some of these numbers. According to CBC News, Toronto, which will post its wait time online, the current wait time if you want a one-bedroom unit as part of the affordable housing program, you need to wait 14 years to get into that program. And these are just the averages. In reality, some people may have to wait more or less, just depending on their personal situation, their needs. And the other thing is that some people may not even be on this waiting list because they don't want to wait 14 years, or they've given up hope on affordable housing, or they just simply don't even know that this program exists or how they can even get on this waiting list. So what does it mean for you if you are looking for affordable housing in Canada's three major cities? Well, honestly, what it really means is that you cannot rely on the system for support. The system that brought you here, you can't rely on that system for support if you need it. The fact of the matter is that you need to look out for yourself. You need to figure out yourself what you can find, where you can find that will fit your lifestyle and fit your budget and won't stretch and take all of your money. The system, as you can see, it's falling apart. And I know this is a really controversial issue. If you go against immigration, you're going to maybe look like a racist. But here's the thing. I'm an immigrant. I immigrated to Canada in 1997 with my parents. I was in grade 2 about the time. So even I feel that what the government is doing with its current immigration targets and trying to cram as many people into the country as possible, it's not right. It's not right to the people who live here. It's not right to people who are trying to come to the country, and you're just going to mess those people up. It's not right any way, shape, or form. I honestly feel that the current government's immigration policy is pushing our housing market and our healthcare system to a breaking point. And maybe we're even past that breaking point. As you may already know, that Canada has been admitting a record number of immigrants in the country. And that's because Canada has a population target of 100 million people by 2100. So why do we have this target, and who came up with it? Let's talk about that for a second. This is a strategy that a group of influential business leaders came up with, and it was then passed on to the government and obviously adopted, since we're seeing those immigration targets. Thought is that the more people you bring in, the more economic growth you'll have, and that will mean more global influence. Because think about it, more people means more pockets of money, and that money will be used to buy products and services that are owned by those same business leaders. And if you buy more things, you will pass on more money from your pocket to their pockets, and they will get that global influence that they're looking for. That's the gist of it. But is this really the best way to get there? What are the costs today? What are the consequences today for Canadians who are facing this housing crisis? According to Diane Francis from the National Post, last year, Canada welcomed nearly 500,000 new immigrants, all of whom will eventually be issued health cards. And guess what that means? That will entitle them to free health care. This year, we're going to see another 465,000 people. And then the year after that, we'll see 485,000, and then another 500,000. And guess what? Everyone gets a health card. You get a health card. You get a health card. Everybody gets a health card and access to our crumbling healthcare system. Between 2016 and 2021, the Trudeau government admitted a record of over 1.3 million permanent immigrants into the country. And guess what? all of them have been issued health cards, which will get them access to our healthcare system. Yes, not everyone will need medical services at the same time, but at some point, at any given point, anybody can walk into our healthcare system and use it, right? Like, that's the point. As soon as you bring in that many people, they will need housing, they will need healthcare, they will need transportation. Do we have the systems in place to provide all that? This has put so much pressure on some of our largest urban centers, Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, because that's where bulk of the new people come and settle. This places a lot of pressures on these municipalities to provide those services. For every small or major medical concern, everyone just goes to the ER. And what are the wait times like in those ER rooms? What are the wait times if you need to go see a specialist? Yes, it's free healthcare, but how much time are you paying for to get that service? Canadians right now face some of the longest wait times to get medical attention, to get elective surgeries. Millions don't even have access to a family physician. We are struggling to provide two basic needs for everyone: housing and healthcare. The Financial Accountability Office of Ontario projects that Ontario alone will be short 33,000 nurses and personal support workers by 2028. Canada's immigration levels are disproportionate when compared to other developed economic countries. We're taking in nearly 4 times as many immigrants as compared to the United States on a per capita basis. On top of that, the current government's screening policy for new people, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Despite the staggering number of people we're letting into the country, we know we have a housing crisis. We know we have a healthcare crisis. There's a shortage of skilled labor, but we're not targeting tradespeople with those skills that the country needs. Again, I don't get it. I just don't get it. Seems like the policy is, let's just cram in as many people as possible. As long as they have some money, they'll spend on our economic engines. It'll help drive profit growth for our businesses. Let's just focus on that. This means that many immigrants who come here are going to end up either unemployed or underemployed, and then they'll have to use the social welfare system just to get by. And on top of that, that means they're competing with current residents of the country, current Canadians, for the same jobs, for the same scarce resources on healthcare and housing. The point is, it's not immigration itself that's bad for Canada or for the citizens or whatever you want to call it. The problem is the way the current policy is built. We're not addressing the root cause. We're only scratching the surface here. I mean, if an immigrant is questioning the country's immigration policy, I feel like there's definitely something wrong here. And I don't think the government is going to fix the issue. That's the real issue. So how do we actually fix this? Well, feel free to disagree with this approach, but I honestly think we need to pause our immigration policy until really we can figure out what it is that we want to provide for our citizens and for our potential new citizens. Can we build that healthcare? Can we build the infrastructure? Can we provide affordable housing for everyone that needs it? At the end of the day, the immigration policy needs to be a targeted approach. Let's bring in target immigration levels to areas where it's needed the most, areas of skills where we need the most, healthcare professionals, tradespeople. Let's try to spread people out and focus on communities that are desperate for people, so those areas can grow economically. We don't want to just cram everybody into 2 cities and just let's us see what happens. It's just a strain on resources all around. So what do you think? Can we actually fix the situation at hand? Is there a way that we can still bring in people and provide services? I honestly want to really see and hear your thoughts. Please let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to check out some amazing offers I have for you in the description of this video for some amazing discounts and some amazing sign-up bonuses and for some great resources. Thank you so much for watching. That's it for now, and I'll talk to you in the comments section.